Jessica smirked, sure that Natalia's career was done. But before the announcement could go any further, Dmitri's voice boomed from the screen, making her words falter. Careful, Jessica. Betrayal has a price. And you're about to pay. The room tensed. The game was about to change, and no one was prepared for the fallout. I know you can't wait to enjoy this amazing story, but before we proceed, let me know in the comment section where in this beautiful world you are watching from, and do not forget to like, share and subscribe to this amazing channel. Let's go. The door to the boardroom opened with a soft creak, but it was the deafening silence that greeted Natalia that told her everything she needed to know. The room was unusually still, a quiet tension hanging in the air as she entered. She had been summoned for what she thought was a routine board meeting, but the weight of the atmosphere made her question everything. The board members, usually so animated, sat stiff and unnervingly quiet, exchanging glances with one another. Jessica was already seated at the head of the table, her ever-present smile now replaced with a cold, calculated expression. Natalia's eyes narrowed. Something was wrong. She could feel it deep in her gut. Only hours before, she had received the call. Jessica had assured her that the company's restructuring would be discussed, that her promotion was imminent. But the coldness in Jessica's voice left an unsettling feeling in Natalia's chest. She had brushed it off at first, thinking it was just nerves. But now, walking into this room, she was starting to see the cracks in the veneer. The HR department had been quiet lately. Almost too quiet. There had been subtle hints about upcoming changes, but nothing concrete. Still, Natalia had always been confident in her role, certain she had earned the trust of the board. She was about to prove herself in a major way. But as she sat at the table, the room's icy atmosphere felt like a noose slowly tightening around her neck. And as Jessica stood to begin the meeting, a sinister smile flickering across her face, Natalia's heart sank. She wasn't about to get a promotion. She was about to be publicly humiliated. Today, Jessica began, her voice steady but too controlled, we're going to discuss an important transition, a promotion that comes with significant changes for the company. Natalia sat straight in her chair, bracing herself, but something about Jessica's demeanor made her skin crawl. The words on the tip of Jessica's tongue were far from what Natalia expected. The new chief operations officer will be announced, Jessica continued, her smile too wide. And while we've been excited about this new role, Jessica paused, giving Natalia a look that felt like a warning. It's with regret that we inform you, Natalia, that your services are no longer needed. Effective immediately. A sudden chill swept over the room. But just as the sting of betrayal began to settle in, something unexpected happened. The lights flickered, and the screens behind Jessica came to life. On the screen, a man appeared, sitting in a dark, opulent room. He was calm, poised, and deadly. Dmitri. The room froze. The mafia boss's voice cut through the silence, cool and confident. Jessica, I trust you're aware of the breach in our agreement, he began. The room shifted nervously as Jessica's smile faded. Who is this? One of the executives whispered, though no one dared speak above a breath. I'm the man who made sure Natalia's position here was secure. And now I'm here to ensure she's never humiliated again. Dmitri's gaze met Natalia's through the screen, and for the first time in hours, she felt the weight lift from her shoulders. The tension in the room shattered, and Jessica's smirk turned to terror. The board, once stone-faced, now looked like frightened animals. You think you can just... Jessica began, but her words faltered under Dmitri's unyielding stare. I suggest you rethink that, Dmitri replied smoothly. I've invested far too much in Natalia to watch her fall. Now it's time for her to rise. The boardroom was silent, every eye trained on Jessica, whose face was ashen. The board meeting that was supposed to be her victory had just turned into a public failure. As the screen cuts off, Dmitri's words linger in the air. Consider this your last warning, Jessica. If you try to take her down again, you won't have a place here or anywhere. The room is left stunned, and Natalia's heart pounds in her chest as the true battle for her future has only just begun. The mafia boss's unexpected intervention has turned the tables in a way no one could have predicted. The early morning light filtered into the office as Jessica sat at her desk, a smug smile playing on her lips. She was always 2 steps ahead, her mind weaving a web of manipulation, and today was no different. She knew exactly what she was doing, every move, every word carefully calculated. Today, the final pieces of her plan would fall into place. Jessica had been working quietly behind the scenes, partnering with Evan and certain influential board members to orchestrate the perfect trap for Natalia. The promotion that Natalia believed was coming her way was nothing more than a setup. The promotion would be announced with fanfare, a public acknowledgement of Natalia's hard work, but Jessica had already planned the next step. The rug would be yanked out from under her. In front of the entire board, Jessica would announce Natalia's promotion, only to follow it up with an immediate termination. The words would come out in rapid succession, shocking Natalia, humiliating her in front of her peers. The executives, who had always been wary of Natalia's growing influence, would watch as Jessica took control of the situation. Natalia, once at the top, would be shown to be replaceable. Her confidence would shatter. It was a move meant to destabilize her, to crush her spirit. The board would think they had solved the problem of her growing power in the company, and Jessica would be the one to take all the credit. She had always known that there was only room for one woman at the top, and Natalia had outlasted her usefulness. As Jessica sat back, a bitter memory flashed in Natalia's mind. It was a simpler time, the days when she and Evan worked side by side to build the company. Back then, it felt like everything had been possible. Evan had been her mentor, the one who instilled the values of loyalty and trust in her. They'd shared long nights strategizing, laying down the foundations for what was now a thriving, respected business. They had spoken often about how they would handle the challenges that came with success. They had made promises to one another. They would never betray the company, and they would always look out for the people who had helped them build it. For a long time, those promises had seemed unbreakable. But now, Natalia looked around at the fractured atmosphere in the office, the cold glares from certain colleagues, and the growing distance between her and Evan. His latest decisions, the alliance with Jessica, the sudden coldness in his demeanor, left her feeling like an outsider in her own company. The betrayal stung, cutting deeper than anything she had anticipated. The man she had trusted had turned his back on her, and with every move Jessica made, the walls of betrayal grew higher. The loyalty she had once extended so freely was being used against her, twisted by the very people she had helped elevate. For the past few days, Natalia had been noticing subtle shifts. The way her colleagues no longer met her eyes, the whispers that stopped when she walked into the room, the questions left unanswered. Something was off. During lunch breaks, the office buzz seemed to fade as she passed by, conversations suddenly dying. Once supportive colleagues were now distant, avoiding her questions with vague answers. Every now and then she would catch a quick glance, too quick to be casual, yet too obvious to ignore. The strange behavior began to gnaw at her, like a deep unease building in her stomach. She couldn't pinpoint why, but the unease had turned into a steady, nagging suspicion. There was something about the way they were acting. She had spent years building relationships within the company, and yet it felt as though she was being pushed out of the fold. A chill ran through her when she overheard two senior executives, ones who had always been friendly to her, talking in hushed tones. They stopped as soon as they saw her, offering weak smiles that didn't reach their eyes. That moment felt like a punch to the gut. She had been here long enough to understand office politics, but this was something different. What was happening? Was it all in her head, or was something bigger unfolding? Her instincts told her that the quiet whispers, the cold shoulders, and the sudden, strange conversations weren't coincidences. Someone was planning something. The next day, Natalia was invited to a strategy meeting with Jessica. She knew that something wasn't right, but she played along, knowing she would need to stay calm and composed no matter what was said. Jessica, as usual, was charismatic and sharp, but there was an edge to her that Natalia couldn't quite place. Jessica went over the company's restructuring plans, offering vague assurances that everything was in order. When Natalia's name came up, Jessica spoke with an unsettlingly sweet tone. "We're going to be looking at Natalia's role closely," Jessica said, scanning the room for reactions. "The restructuring is going to require us to evaluate how we use our resources. We've all been impressed by her contributions, but I think it's time for a change." The words "time for a change" were soft, almost soothing, but Natalia could hear the underlying meaning. Jessica wasn't talking about positive changes. She was setting the stage. The whispers she had been hearing were all coming together. The meeting continued, but Natalia's mind raced. Jessica had no idea that Natalia was already one step ahead. She had been carefully tracking every subtle move in the office. She'd been compiling evidence of Jessica's manipulation, quietly gathering information on her every move. It wouldn't be enough to stop her this time, but it would be enough to use against her when the time came. As the meeting ended, Jessica looked at Natalia with a smile, one that felt far too fake for comfort. "We'll discuss your position soon, Natalia," she said. "I'm sure you'll understand. This is just about aligning things for the future of the company." Natalia nodded, her thoughts already racing. The future of the company wasn't what Jessica was concerned about. It was her own future, and the people she was about to step on to secure it. That evening, Natalia received the final calendar invite for the board meeting. She had been waiting for this moment, but as she clicked open the invite, a cold shiver ran through her. The agenda was brief: company restructuring, promotion updates, and leadership changes. Leadership changes. Her name was listed under the promotion section, but she couldn't ignore the feeling creeping up her spine. This wasn't just a simple update. This was the meeting where it would all go down. The board meeting would be the moment where everything she had worked for would either be destroyed or solidified. Was it just a promotion? Or was this the beginning of her professional annihilation? She closed her laptop and leaned back in her chair, staring at the blank screen in front of her. The weight of the moment hit her like a punch to the gut. She didn't know what Jessica and Evan were planning, but she knew it was something big. And she was about to walk right into the heart of it. Natalia sat at her desk, her mind racing with everything that had unfolded that morning. The eerie calm of the office was starting to feel suffocating, and the weight of Jessica's words echoed in her mind. But as she ran through the details again, trying to piece together what was happening, a thought lingered in the back of her mind. Something she hadn't considered until now. There was someone she had trusted for years, someone who had always kept a careful distance yet whose influence had silently ensured her rise in the company. Dmitri. Most people in the corporate world were unaware of the extent of her connection to Dmitri, a name whispered only in the most shadowy circles. He was a powerful mafia boss with vast influence in both the underworld and legitimate business ventures. But Natalia knew him as more than just a crime lord. He was the one who had seen her potential long before she'd even considered the possibility of climbing the corporate ladder. Dmitri's interest in her hadn't been driven solely by his underworld dealings, though. No, he had recognized Natalia's sharp intellect, her unwavering ambition, and her ability to build relationships. She had worked alongside him in various legal ventures, quietly helping him expand his empire into legitimate industries, and in return, he had quietly supported her career growth. His influence, far-reaching and powerful, had remained in the background, ensuring that no one would dare cross her. She had always respected Dmitri, even admired him, but she had never fully understood the scope of his influence until now. The realization of how deep his reach went, even within the corporate world, unsettled her. As Jessica and the others schemed, they had no idea that the very person they were about to push into a corner had someone like Dmitri watching her every move from the shadows. Dmitri had been quietly working behind the scenes, using his network of legitimate business contacts to keep Natalia's career trajectory on the right track. While the world only saw him as a feared mafia boss, his operations spanned across industries: construction, real estate, tech startups, and even banking. His web of influence was vast, stretching from boardrooms in skyscrapers to the hidden corners of the underworld. Natalia didn't know how deep Dmitri's protection ran, but she had always felt an unspoken sense of security, a safety net that seemed to appear when things got tough. He had quietly shielded her from countless corporate threats, using his connections to push her career forward when she needed it most. The merger deals she had closed, aiding in her rapid rise through the company? Dmitri's behind-the-scenes guidance had played a crucial role in all of it, though she had never directly acknowledged his involvement. While she had never asked for it, Dmitri had seen the potential in her that others couldn't. He knew the corporate world, with its cutthroat politics, could be brutal, and he had made sure to use his resources to protect her. Whenever a rival company or competitor tried to harm her, Dmitri's unseen hand had dealt with it swiftly. Whether through legal maneuvers or less than legal channels, Natalia had always come out on top. And now, as the storm brewed around her, an HR conspiracy, a plot to humiliate her publicly, she didn't realize just how much Dmitri had already done to protect her. His reach extended far beyond what she could see, keeping her position safe from the corporate sharks circling in the water. Natalia couldn't quite place. We are pleased to announce that, effective immediately, Dmitri had never been one to tolerate betrayal, especially not when it involved someone he considered valuable, someone he had invested in. As the news of the HR conspiracy reached him through his ever-expanding network, his anger flared. He'd already been watching the situation unfold from a distance, aware of the tension in the office. But now that he knew the full extent of Jessica's manipulations and her plot to humiliate Natalia, he made a decision. He wouldn't let this go unpunished. Dmitri understood the stakes. He didn't just care about Natalia's career for sentimental reasons. She was an asset. Her position in the company was crucial to his own legitimate business ventures. He needed her there, strategically placed in a position of power. The actions of Jessica and the others, in attempting to tear her down, had put everything at risk, not just Natalia's career, but his own interests. So Dmitri made a call. He instructed his closest associates, those who could infiltrate the company without anyone suspecting a thing, to get close to the boardroom. He needed real-time updates. Every move Jessica made would be monitored, every step she took, every word she spoke would be tracked. No one in the company, from the highest executives to the lower ranks, would be left in the dark. He had been silent until now, operating from the shadows, but it was time for him to make his presence known. The world would learn that you didn't mess with Natalia. And when you tried, Dmitri was always watching, ready to pounce. As the pieces of the plan were set into motion, Dmitri's mind was already calculating the next move. The board meeting that was supposed to destroy Natalia's career was about to become a turning point in the company's history. As Natalia left her office that evening, she received a cryptic message on her phone from a trusted associate. Someone within the company who had been feeding Dmitri updates on the situation. The message was simple, yet chilling. It's in motion. Be ready. Natalia froze, her heart racing. What did that mean? What was Dmitri planning? Her eyes narrowed as she looked down at the message. The board meeting, the trap, the promotion, everything was about to change, but she didn't know how. All she knew was that she had allies in the most unexpected places, and whatever happened next, she wouldn't face it alone. The next morning, as the board meeting loomed, Natalia had no idea just how deep the game was about to get. But one thing was clear. Dmitri had set the stage, and now everything would be revealed. Natalia's heels clicked on the polished floor as she walked toward the boardroom. It was a sound she had come to associate with success, the steady rhythm of someone who had worked her way to the top. But today, the familiar noise felt foreign. Every step seemed to echo louder than usual, each click reverberating in her chest as though the weight of what was about to unfold pressed down on her. She had prepared for this moment. She had fought for this position, worked tirelessly to secure her place. But now, as she reached for the door, her hand hesitated. A cold knot formed in her stomach, a gnawing feeling that something wasn't right. The door opened with a soft sigh as she stepped inside. The long, rectangular table was already filled with the company's top executives. Some who had supported her, some who had been distant. Today, they all seemed different. There was an unease in the air, a tension that didn't belong in a room where decisions were usually made with confidence. She took her seat at the far end of the table, her mind racing. She scanned the room, noting the odd glances exchanged among the board members. Evan, the CEO, was scribbling something on his notes, his eyes flicking to her and then quickly back to the paper. Jessica was poised at the front, her smile too tight, her voice too smooth. The usual calm she exuded now seemed forced. Something was wrong. Natalia settled into her chair, straightening her back and taking a deep breath. She had been through countless meetings before, but this one felt different. She glanced around the table, catching the eyes of a few colleagues. Some looked uncomfortable, others simply indifferent. It was as though the room was holding its breath, waiting for something to happen. The meeting began as any other, with Jessica casually outlining the company's restructuring efforts. But Natalia couldn't shake the feeling that today wasn't just about company updates. She had worked too hard, built too much to let anything slip through her fingers now. As Jessica droned on about logistics and projections, Natalia's mind wandered to the past few weeks. The strange coldness in the office, the odd whispers behind closed doors. She'd chalked it up to normal corporate maneuvering, but now the pieces began to fall into place. The promotion she had been promised, was that what they were really offering her? Or was this a game, a cruel bait and switch? Now, Jessica's voice cut through the murmurs of the room. We come to an important update regarding leadership roles within the company. Natalia's pulse quickened. She had prepared herself for this moment, but she wasn't prepared for what was about to come next. The room seemed to shrink as Jessica's eyes locked on hers, a fleeting but telling smile on her lips. Natalia's stomach flipped as Jessica spoke. It's been a pleasure to watch Natalia grow within the company, Jessica continued, her words smooth but laced with an undertone. Natalia will be moving into a higher role, one that reflects her hard work and commitment. A brief pause. Natalia felt a momentary rush of relief, but something about the way Jessica delivered the words made her wary. There was something off in the air. And with this promotion, Jessica added, her eyes shifting slightly to the board members, we've decided that Natalia's role will be restructured within the company's new direction. The words hung in the air like a bad omen. I'm pleased to announce that Natalia will officially become the new Chief Operating Officer, overseeing all major projects and departments, a move that we believe will enhance company growth moving forward, Jessica continued. However, a flicker of hesitation passed through Jessica's smile as she glanced at Evan and the others. There was a noticeable shift in her tone, as if she were preparing for something far more dramatic. And that's when the trap closed. The restructuring also means that, effective immediately, Natalia will no longer be with the company in her previous role, Jessica finished, her voice cold and detached, as if reading off a script. Natalia's heart skipped a beat. The words felt like a physical blow, but she refused to let the shock show. She kept her expression neutral, her hands resting calmly on the table. Inside, her thoughts raced. What was happening? The boardroom was quiet for a split second. There was a subtle tension in the air, but no one moved or spoke. Jessica looked at Natalia, and for the briefest moment, a flicker of something, triumph perhaps, passed through her eyes. The room seemed to hold its breath. Several board members exchanged quick, nervous glances, their eyes darting between Jessica and Natalia. Some were clearly shocked, others more quietly amused. Evan, the CEO, sat at the head of the table, his expression unreadable. Natalia's heart raced, but she kept her composure. She knew this moment was coming, but nothing could have prepared her for the feeling of betrayal crashing over her like a wave. The humiliation was palpable. This wasn't just about losing her position. It was about being publicly discarded, her career torn apart in front of those she had once trusted. Her eyes flicked around the room, searching for support or even a flicker of regret in anyone's face, but all she saw were masked expressions and empty stares. No one stood up for her. No one spoke up. The cold indifference of her colleagues cut through her like a knife. But Natalia was no stranger to adversity. She wasn't going to let them see her falter. She sat taller, her spine straight as steel, masking the emotional turmoil she felt inside. There was no way they would break her. Not like this. Not without a fight. Just as Jessica prepared to finish the final details of her announcement, a sudden flicker interrupted the room. The lights dimmed briefly before the boardroom screens came to life with a sudden jolt. A video feed filled the large screen at the front of the room. The screen showed a man, sitting in an opulent chair, his face calm and collected. He was well-dressed, his suit sharp, his presence undeniably powerful. Dmitri. The room fell silent. Dmitri, the mafia boss, spoke directly to the board, his voice oozing with authority. I trust you all are aware of the situation unfolding, he said smoothly, eyes never leaving the camera. What you may not know is that Natalia is more than just an employee to this company. She is someone I have invested in, and her future is not something you can control. The room froze. Jessica's face drained of color, and the air shifted. Natalia's heart pounded in her chest. She hadn't expected this, hadn't anticipated the mafia boss's intervention, And yet here he was, a force that could not be ignored. Dmitri's voice cut through the silence with chilling clarity. If you think for a moment that you can disgrace Natalia without consequences, you are gravely mistaken. The screen flickered again, and the image of Dmitri remained, casting a shadow over the room as the board members exchanged horrified glances. The room was deathly quiet. No one moved. No one breathed. The flicker of the screen still lingered as the tall, imposing figure of Dmitri appeared on the boardroom monitors. He sat casually in an elegant, dimly lit office, a stark contrast to the sterile white walls and fluorescent lighting of the corporate meeting room. His demeanor was calm, almost too calm, but beneath that calm was a level of authority that made even the most seasoned board members shrink back. Natalia's eyes were fixed on the screen, her heart hammering in her chest. She hadn't expected this intervention from Dmitri. But now that he had shown himself, she realized how powerful his influence truly was. His appearance was like a silent bomb detonating in the boardroom, his words the fuse. He addressed the room with the same cold precision he had always shown in his business dealings. His voice was smooth, controlled, yet there was an undeniable weight to it, a finality that made the room feel smaller, more suffocating. "I trust you're all aware of the situation," Dmitri began, his eyes scanning the board, making direct eye contact with each member. His voice was low but carried with it a presence that filled every corner of the room. "You may not know me personally, but I have watched Natalia's progress with great interest, and I have invested in her, both in the company and in her potential. Any attempt to undermine her will have serious consequences." The word sent a ripple through the boardroom, and for the first time, Jessica's smug smile faltered. She glanced nervously at the others. No one expected this, least of all her. She had thought she was the one holding the cards, but now she realized that Dmitri was playing a much larger game. Dmitri didn't wait for anyone to speak. He knew how to command the room without raising his voice. He leaned forward slightly, his fingers lightly touching the armrest of his chair, his eyes locking with Jessica's. "It seems there's been a misunderstanding," Dmitri continued, his tone almost mocking. "The very person you thought you were so easily casting aside, the one you planned to humiliate, she's not just a resource to be discarded. She's a strategic partner." His words hit like a sledgehammer. The board members exchanged uneasy glances. Natalia had always known she had support from Dmitri, but hearing him openly declare her partnership with him in front of everyone was something else entirely. "Jessica," Dmitri said, his voice lowering, "you think you've been playing a game, manipulating the board to your advantage. But what you failed to understand is that you've been playing with fire. You tried to tear down someone who is more than just an employee. And now you'll have to answer for it." Dmitri's gaze never left Jessica. Her face had drained of color. The realization of what was happening hit her with full force, and her composure faltered. She opened her mouth to speak, but the words caught in her throat. Dmitri didn't allow her the luxury of a response. "I've been supporting Natalia for years, providing backing both personally and professionally. What you may not know is that I've invested heavily in this company's success. It's not just her career I've been protecting. It's mine too." The air in the room grew thick with the weight of his revelation. The board members who had thought themselves untouchable were now realizing that they had miscalculated. The game they had been playing was nothing compared to the world Dmitri inhabited. Jessica had been manipulating Natalia's position, but it was clear now that the mafia boss had been quietly maneuvering behind the scenes, ensuring that Natalia was always a step ahead. The revelation shattered Jessica's illusion of control. Dmitri's voice, smooth and unyielding, cut through the tension. "You thought you could oust her, humiliate her, and get away with it. But now the truth is out, and the consequences are yours to face." The room was in chaos, though the chaos was silent. Executives who had once sat with their chests puffed out in arrogant confidence were now shifting uncomfortably in their seats. Whispers buzzed around the table, but no one dared speak out loud. Evan, who had been the first to support Jessica's plan, was now glaring at the screen, his fingers nervously tapping against the table. He had underestimated Dmitri, and now the repercussions of that mistake were crashing down on him. Jessica's face was a portrait of disbelief, her mouth opening and closing as she tried to process the situation. She had thought she was playing the role of a corporate power player, controlling her narrative, but now she was the one being played. Her mind raced, but the words didn't come. She was out of her depth, and everyone in the room knew it. The board, which had once been so eager to follow Jessica's lead, now looked to each other for guidance. The power dynamic had shifted in an instant. No one spoke up for her. No one defended her. Dmitri's words rang out, clear and unassailable. "You've exposed your greed, and now you will pay the price. But this is not just about the game you tried to play with Natalia. This is about loyalty. And any further attempts to undermine her, or anyone else who has stood by me, will have consequences far worse than what you can imagine." As his words hung in the air, the silence in the room was suffocating. No one dared move. The power had shifted completely, and the reality of the situation was sinking in. The screen flickered again, Dmitri's face briefly disappearing before coming back into focus. His eyes locked with Natalia's, the weight of his gaze reassuring and unwavering. "There's one thing you should know," Dmitri said, his tone deadly calm. "The only reason you're still sitting here, Jessica, is because I'm giving you one final chance to leave this room with whatever dignity you have left. But if you continue to make a move against Natalia, or anyone I deem valuable, you will be erased. Completely." The screen flickered once more, this time going black, leaving the room in utter silence. The sharp click of the screen powering down echoed in the room, marking the end of one era, and the beginning of another. The executives sat frozen, unable to move or speak. Jessica's face was white as she gripped the edge of the table, her breath shallow. Her carefully constructed web had just unraveled, and Dmitri had made it clear. There was no safe space for anyone who betrayed loyalty. Natalia sat still, her heart pounding, her thoughts racing. She had just witnessed the full extent of Dmitri's power, but what would happen next? Would Jessica and the others try to retaliate, or had Dmitri truly secured her position once and for all? The meeting had only just begun, and the battle for control was far from over. The room was still, the silence thick with anticipation. As the last of Dmitri's words echoed through the boardroom, the weight of his power hung heavy in the air. Every eye in the room was on Jessica, who still clutched the table, her knuckles white from the tension, but the real shift was happening now. Dmitri's voice, calm and unwavering, cut through the quiet. "Natalia's promotion is not just a formality," he said, his eyes moving across the board members like a predator assessing its prey. "It must be finalized immediately. You will announce her as the new chief operations officer now, in front of the board. She will be in control of the company's most critical departments, effective today." There was no negotiation, no room for hesitation. His words were as sharp as a blade, and the truth in them was undeniable. Natalia's heart pounded in her chest, but she kept her composure. This was the moment she had been building toward. With Dmitri's backing, the position she had fought for would be hers, but this time it wouldn't be handed to her. She would take it. She glanced at the board members, some looking relieved, others visibly uncomfortable. They had no choice now. Dmitri's influence in the company was clear, and to cross him was not an option. But the gravity of the moment wasn't lost on Natalia. Her rise was no longer just about professional success. It was a statement. She was here to stay. The boardroom remained tense as Jessica, still stunned, reluctantly nodded toward the board's chairperson, signaling the start of the formal announcement. Her smile, once smug and self-assured, now appeared strained. The truth of her betrayal was becoming painfully clear. Jessica had been so certain. She thought she had outsmarted Natalia, that her careful plotting and manipulation would pay off. The promotion announcement, the humiliation of Natalia, all of it was supposed to elevate Jessica in the eyes of the board. But now, as the board stared back at her, Jessica saw her own plans crumbling. The chairperson stood, clearing their throat, and nodded to the head of the table. "It's clear that the company is moving in a new direction," they began, their tone neutral but pointed. "We will now proceed with the announcement of the new chief operations officer." The words were a blow to Jessica's ego. She had expected this moment to be her victory, the culmination of all her efforts to replace Natalia with herself. But instead, her name was nowhere to be found. The name that would be spoken next was that of the very woman she had worked to destroy. Natalia, the chairperson continued. Effective immediately, you will assume the role of Chief Operations Officer. Your experience, leadership, and vision have brought you to this point. Congratulations. Jessica's face turned a shade of pale she had never shown before. She had fought for this position, had schemed and manipulated to ensure that Natalia would fall. But now, everything was slipping through her fingers. Wait, Jessica interjected, her voice shaky as she stood up, trying to regain some semblance of control. This is a mistake. The restructuring. Her words faltered as the room's attention shifted entirely to her. The calm, collected expression on her face replaced with one of desperation. She tried to justify her actions, claiming that it was in the company's best interest, that the change was necessary for growth, but it was too late. The board wasn't listening anymore. They were watching, eyes narrowing, as her credibility fell apart. Evan, once her most ardent supporter, didn't meet her eyes. The other board members exchanged uncomfortable glances. They had been aware of Jessica's machinations for some time, but none of them had expected the mafia boss to intervene with such force, to pull the rug from under their feet in front of them all. It was over. The trust in Jessica, built through years of corporate maneuvering, was shattered in a heartbeat. Natalia stood, her back straight as she took in the room. She didn't speak immediately. She didn't need to. The calmness with which she carried herself now was in stark contrast to the nervous tension that had gripped her moments before. With Dmitri's intervention, everything had changed. She wasn't just being handed a position, she was claiming it, and she was about to make sure everyone knew it. Jessica's desperate pleas faded into the background as Natalia's voice rang clear. "Thank you for the trust, everyone," she began, her tone steady but powerful. "I am honored to take on this role, and I assure you, we will move forward with a renewed focus on integrity, loyalty, and performance. No one in this company should feel that they are expendable, because we succeed or fail together." Her words weren't just about her rise. They were a challenge to everyone who had ever doubted her, a reaffirmation of the strength and determination she had always carried within her. As she addressed the board, Natalia's confidence was undeniable. Her gaze moved across the room, locking eyes with each of the executives, establishing her presence in a way that left no room for doubt. This was her time, and she wasn't about to let anyone take it from her. Not Jessica, not Evan, and certainly not anyone who had been part of the plan to tear her down. "I look forward to working with each of you," she said, her voice carrying across the room. "But understand this. My loyalty will always lie with those who believe in fairness, respect, and transparency. If you stand by those values, we'll build something great together." The message was clear. Natalia was in charge now, and there would be no room for manipulation or betrayal in her leadership. Just as the meeting was winding down, Jessica stood to leave, her head hanging low, but her eyes, those eyes still burned with quiet rage. She had been defeated, but her ambition was far from extinguished. The room had shifted, but the battle wasn't over. Natalia knew Jessica would be back, plotting in the shadows, looking for a way to regain control. As Jessica walked out of the boardroom, her voice was barely audible, but Natalia caught her last words. "You've won today, Natalia," Jessica said quietly, her face twisted with frustration. "But you haven't seen the last of me. I'll make sure of that." Natalia felt the chill of the threat, but she remained calm. Jessica wasn't the only one with power, and now, with Dmitri's influence firmly behind her, Natalia knew she was ready for whatever would come next. The first battle had been won, but the war? That was just beginning. It happened swiftly. One moment, Jessica was standing in the boardroom, attempting to salvage whatever shred of dignity she could, and the next, she was escorted out of the building, her access to the company's systems and resources revoked. The investigation into her actions had been thorough, methodical. As soon as Dmitri's intervention had exposed her manipulations, the company's legal team wasted no time uncovering the full extent of her betrayal. Documents, emails, and even confidential meeting notes were used as evidence against her. It was clear. Jessica had been using her position to orchestrate Natalia's downfall for her own personal gain, all while undermining the integrity of the company. The security team, typically only involved in emergencies, was now involved in Jessica's termination. She didn't put up a fight, not after the devastating revelation. Her once confident stride now seemed broken, and the cold, calculating woman who had once been untouchable now walked out of the building, shoulders slumped, as whispers filled the halls behind her. Jessica had underestimated the power of loyalty. She had thought she could manipulate the system, but in the end, her own ambition had been her downfall. Evan, once her steadfast ally, now stood at the center of his own unraveling. His reputation, once solid and respected within the company, crumbled with Jessica's exposure. As the legal team began digging deeper, they uncovered more than just Jessica's machinations. They uncovered Evan's involvement. He had been complicit in backing Jessica's plot, silently supporting her from the sidelines, believing that his position as CEO would shield him from any consequences. But he was wrong. In a matter of days, Evan's career came to an end. The board, unwilling to risk any further scandal, forced him to step down. The announcement came swiftly. The company needed stability, and Evan's betrayal left them with no choice but to sever all ties. The press release went out. Evan had resigned from his role as CEO, effective immediately. The company is restructuring under the new leadership of Chief Operations Officer, Natalia. Evan's name was quickly scrubbed from the company's public records. His former colleagues, who once had looked up to him, now avoided him in the halls. The man who had been untouchable, who had once walked with arrogance and authority, was now nothing more than a footnote in the company's history. And Jessica. Her name, too, would be erased from the company's internal communications, her reputation destroyed beyond repair. Behind the scenes, Dmitri worked quickly to ensure that the consequences of Jessica and Evan's actions weren't just limited to the company. His influence stretched far beyond the boardroom. Dmitri had deep connections with high-powered business moguls, government officials, and influential figures in industries around the world. Jessica's and Evan's names were quietly erased from the corporate world, their ties to the company severed with precision. Through Dmitri's network, they were quietly blacklisted in the business community. Their ability to secure future positions in legitimate business was destroyed. Deals that had once been available to them were now off-limits. The underworld didn't forgive, but neither did the business world. No one would want to work with those who had been involved in such a public scandal, especially when Dmitri's name was attached to it. His shadow loomed over their ruined careers, ensuring that they would never recover. Natalia knew that this was Dmitri's doing, the silent, deadly reach of his power that extended far beyond the confines of the office. She had been protected, yes, but his influence had also been the hammer that crushed her enemies. As the days passed and the fallout from Jessica and Evan's downfalls continued, Natalia found herself standing at the window of her new office, gazing out at the city skyline. The view was different now. She had taken control, and she had fought to get here. Her rise had been marked by calculated steps, but the suddenness of her promotion, coupled with the drama of the last few days, had left her breathless. She had been the target of a well-laid plan to disgrace her, humiliate her in front of the people she had worked alongside for so long. But in the end, it had been her strength, her ability to stay calm under pressure, and Dmitri's unyielding support that had turned the tide. Natalia had not only survived, she had thrived. She stood here now, the new COO of the company, with a clear view of what she needed to do. The restructuring wasn't just about her. It was about reshaping the company from the inside out. She could feel the eyes of the employees and executives on her. Some would be loyal. Others would doubt her. But Natalia knew one thing. She had a responsibility to make sure this company, which had become her home, succeeded on her terms. She thought about Jessica's final desperate attempt to regain control. She had tried to tear Natalia down, but Natalia wasn't the same woman she had been when she first walked into this company. She had learned that loyalty, trust, and transparency were more than just words. They were the foundation of true power. And it was that power that would now shape her path. With Dmitri's continued backing, Natalia knew that her ascent had only just begun. But there were larger battles on the horizon. This victory, while sweet, was only the first in a long series of challenges. As the company's new leader, she would have to navigate power struggles, corporate espionage, and those who still tried to undermine her at every turn. But for now, she allowed herself a moment to reflect on how far she had come. The corporate sharks had circled, and the mafia shadows had loomed over her career. Yet here she stood, stronger than ever, poised to take the company in a new direction. As Natalia walked out of her new office, she reached for her phone. The screen flashed with a new message from Dmitri. There are bigger battles ahead. Prepare yourself. Her heart skipped a beat. She had no doubt that this was far from over. As much as she had fought for control, there were always forces working in the background. Forces she would need to confront head-on. The question wasn't whether she was ready for the next battle. The question was, how far would she go to secure her place at the top? The game had just begun, and Natalia knew that the stakes were higher than ever. The office was abuzz with the whirlwind of change, and Natalia stood at the center of it all, the orchestrator of this new era. The last few weeks had been a blur, dealing with the fallout from Jessica's betrayal, securing her position as the new COO, and watching as the company's corporate landscape shifted beneath her feet. But now, with Dmitri's unwavering support and the pieces of her plan falling into place, she could finally breathe. Natalia was in control. The chaos had subsided, but the work was only beginning. Her first order of business was to root out the inefficiencies that had plagued the company for far too long. She had inherited a ship that was listing, and it was her job to steer it straight. She made it clear from the start, those who had aligned themselves with Jessica's manipulations were now expendable. Trust and loyalty were no longer just ideals. They were the currency of her leadership. Under her direction, several executives who had been involved in Jessica's underhanded dealings were quietly reassigned or pushed out. Some had resisted the changes, but most quickly saw the writing on the wall. Natalia was unyielding. She didn't just want the title of COO, she wanted to change the company from the inside out. The culture of the company was about to undergo a complete overhaul. No more backroom deals, no more whispers in the halls. Natalia would lead with integrity. Those who had always doubted her, who had assumed she was just another pawn, would soon realize the power that loyalty and transparency could unlock. As her influence grew, Natalia knew that she couldn't fight every battle alone. While Dmitri's support had been crucial, she needed allies within the company. People who could help her solidify her power and push her agenda forward. She began to cultivate relationships with executives who had once been on the periphery of power. Some had been loyal to Jessica, but now, under Natalia's reign, they saw the writing on the wall. There was no room for disloyalty, and those who aligned with her vision would be rewarded. But those who tried to stay neutral or worse, sabotage her from the shadows, would be exposed. Natalia wasn't about to let the ghosts of the past threaten her rise. One of her first new alliances was with Mark, the head of legal. Mark had always been a quiet player in the background, but Natalia saw potential in him. She made it clear that his role would be crucial in the restructuring of the company, and in exchange, Mark became one of her strongest allies. He helped her navigate the delicate legal aspects of firing corrupt executives, drawing up contracts, and ensuring that any pushback from Jessica's faction was met with airtight legal defenses. Another key ally was Sarah, a former senior VP who had been marginalized under Jessica's reign but had immense respect among the company's mid-level managers. Sarah had her own network of loyalists within the company, and when Natalia offered her a seat at the table, Sarah eagerly accepted. Together, they formed a powerful team, one that would help reinforce Natalia's position and build the foundation for the company's new, more transparent culture. With each new ally, Natalia strengthened her position. Her leadership was no longer just an idea, it was becoming a force that others wanted to follow. The more she solidified her power, the more she could push the company toward greater success. But Natalia knew she had to be cautious. The same loyalty she demanded from others needed to be reciprocated. She would lead with fairness, but she wouldn't tolerate betrayal. Dmitri's presence, though less visible, remained an ever-present force behind Natalia's rise. He had stepped back, content to let her take the reins, but his influence was still woven into every decision she made. He continued to provide guidance when needed, but his advice was always tempered with a reminder. Natalia would eventually have to stand on her own. His backing had been vital in helping her reach this point, but Dmitri had made it clear that his support was not infinite. She needed to establish her own power, her own influence, without relying on him for every move. Remember, Dmitri had told her during one of their rare meetings, "This company is your kingdom now. You have the strength, the intelligence, and the vision to lead it. But you have to ensure that no one forgets who put you here." Natalia understood. Dmitri's resources had been indispensable, but now it was her time to prove herself. He would help her in the shadows, but the day would come when she would no longer need him. She would have to stand tall without the protection of his empire. As much as Dmitri had secured her position, Natalia knew that this was her fight. And she was ready. As Natalia walked through the corridors of her new office, she couldn't shake the feeling that there was more to come. The restructuring was progressing smoothly, but a sense of unease lingered in the back of her mind. She had taken control, yes, but what would the future hold? Her phone buzzed, a new message lighting up the screen. It was from Dmitri. There are bigger battles ahead. Prepare yourself. Her fingers tightened around the phone as the weight of his words settled in. The company was hers, but there was something lurking in the shadows, something she couldn't yet see but knew would come. She paused at the window, looking out over the city. Her heart raced with anticipation. She had fought for this, but she couldn't help but wonder. Was this just the beginning? What challenges would arise next, and how far would she have to go to protect the empire she had fought so hard to build? As she took a deep breath, she knew one thing for certain. She would face whatever came next with the same determination that had carried her this far. The battle for control was far from over, and the stakes had never been higher. The calm that had settled over the company after Natalia's rise was deceptive. Despite the sweeping changes she had implemented, despite the allies she had gathered, there was a storm brewing within the walls of her own company. A faction of board members, led by Julian, an ambitious executive who had once worked closely with Jessica, began to stir unrest. Julian had always been calculating, seeing Natalia as a threat to his ambitions. Now that she was firmly at the helm, he was no longer willing to play second fiddle. He had always been one of those executives who played the game well, using charm and influence to advance his position. But with Jessica out of the picture, and Dmitri's looming shadow pulling back, Julian saw an opening. He wasn't about to let Natalia's rise be his downfall. If anything, he believed the company needed a more experienced leader, someone who knew how to navigate the power structures at play. He started to rally a small group of like-minded executives, people who were nervous about the future under Natalia's leadership. They were afraid of change and more comfortable with the old ways, when power was quietly traded in backrooms. As Natalia made bold moves, Julian began to openly question her decisions in private meetings, undermining her authority and turning some members of the board against her. His whispered promises of stability and vision were seductive to those who still believed that Jessica's corporate tactics were the key to success. But Natalia wasn't oblivious. She could feel the tide shifting. As much as she had secured her position, there were those who refused to accept her rule. The internal battle had begun, and Natalia knew she needed to act quickly before the rebellion took root. Dmitri had been her strongest ally, her silent protector. But as the stakes escalated, he began to pull back. He had always known that Natalia's ultimate test would come when she was forced to stand on her own. He had guided her, helped her rise, and now he needed to see if she was ready to handle the challenges that came with true power. When Natalia met him for their final conversation, it wasn't filled with the usual reassurances or instructions. Instead, Dmitri looked at her with an appraising gaze, as though seeing her for the first time. "You're ready, Natalia," he said quietly. "The company is yours to shape. But remember, strength isn't just about making decisions. It's about holding your ground when everyone else is trying to take it from you." His words were simple, but their impact was profound. Dmitri wasn't just releasing her from his shadow. He was ensuring that she had the tools to succeed on her own. He made it clear that his support would always be there, but this battle, the one for control, was hers to fight. Dmitri's departure was a quiet one. He was no longer present in the day-to-day operations of the company, but his influence still lingered like a storm cloud. And while Natalia knew his absence would leave a hole in her inner circle, she also knew that it was time for her to prove she could stand on her own. The final pieces were in motion, and the time had come for her to take the reins fully. The boardroom was set for the showdown. The tension was palpable, the air thick with anticipation. Julian had been circling, waiting for his moment, but today would be different. Today, Natalia would make her stand. Natalia had prepared for this. She had expected the resistance, knew that Julian would try to turn the board against her. But what he didn't know was that she had already secured the loyalty of several key executives who were once on the fence. Mark, Sarah, and a few others had seen through Julian's manipulations and had pledged their support to Natalia. As the board meeting began, Julian wasted no time. He took the lead, starting with a critique of Natalia's recent decisions, questioning her leadership style and the direction of the company. He was smooth, confident, and charming. Everything Natalia had been prepared for. "You see," Julian began, "while Natalia's been making waves with her restructuring, there's a growing concern among the board that she might be overstepping. We need stability, not more disruption." The board members shifted uncomfortably. Some nodded along, their faces revealing the cracks in their loyalty to Natalia. Julian's carefully planted seeds of doubt were taking root. But Natalia wasn't rattled. She had been through far worse. Rising from her seat, she addressed the board with a calm, controlled presence. "Julian," she began, her voice steady but cutting through the tension. "You think I'm disrupting things. What you fail to realize is that the company was never going to succeed under the old ways. You know that as well as I do. We needed change. And we still do." She turned to the board, her eyes scanning each face. She was in command now. She wasn't asking for their approval. She was asserting her authority. "I'm not here to play politics," she continued. "I'm here to lead. And if that means we have to make difficult decisions, then so be it. We don't have the luxury of staying stagnant. We need to evolve, and I will not allow anyone inside or outside of this room to undermine that." Her words hung in the air like a challenge. The room was silent for a moment as everyone processed her stance. Then she continued, "Julian, you've been questioning my leadership, but let me ask you something. What have you done for this company, besides sit back and wait for opportunities to manipulate? I've put my blood, sweat, and tears into this. And now I'm asking the board to decide. Do you want real change, or do you want to go back to the days of backroom deals and hidden agendas?" The board, once divided, began to shift. Sarah and Mark exchanged a glance, and one by one, others began to speak up. They weren't just following her words. They were following her strength. Julian's smug expression began to falter as the tide turned against him. He could feel the ground slipping away beneath him. His usual charm failed him now. And then, as the board's support for Natalia grew, Julian's eyes flashed with something darker. He knew he had lost, but he wasn't going down without a fight. The vote was unanimous. Julian's faction was dissolved. His influence within the company shattered. The board had spoken. Natalia was in control. As the meeting adjourned, the board members filed out of the room, their faces filled with respect for Natalia. She had proven herself in a way no one could have anticipated. The battle had been fierce, but she had emerged victorious. As she walked out of the boardroom, her mind was already turning to the next steps. The company was hers, but the work was never truly done. She would continue to reshape it, pushing it to new heights. But for now, she had won the greatest battle. The power struggle had ended, and Natalia had cemented her place at the top. Just as she was about to sit at her desk, a message from Dmitri flashed on her phone. "You've earned this victory, but don't think for a moment that your fight is over. Bigger battles are ahead. Trust no one." Natalia's fingers tightened around the phone as the weight of Dmitri's words settled in. The game wasn't finished. In fact, it was just beginning. The true test of her leadership and her survival was still to come. Months passed, and the transformation within the company was undeniable. Under Natalia's leadership, the once fractured, inefficient organization had become a well-oiled machine. The restructuring she had implemented took hold, and the company was thriving in ways that hadn't been possible before. Natalia walked through the sleek, glass-walled offices, her steps purposeful, her presence commanding. The staff who once whispered about her, unsure of her ability to lead, now looked to her with respect. Her vision had been clear from the start: integrity, transparency, and loyalty. And as the company grew, so did the belief that these principles were not just words, but the foundation of its future. Jessica and Evan's names were now little more than echoes in the company's history. No one spoke of them anymore, and their absence had left a void, but one that was quickly filled with new faces, loyal and eager to work under Natalia's guidance. Julian, once the ambitious challenger, had slunk off into the shadows of his own failure, no longer a threat to anyone's authority. The rivals who once circled the company, waiting for Natalia to slip, now recognized her as the force she had become. They knew better than to underestimate her. Dmitri, too, had stepped into the background. His influence had been the wind in her sails, but as he had predicted, the time had come for Natalia to navigate her own course. The mafia boss had remained a quiet figure, offering occasional advice, but he no longer needed to step in. Natalia was in control, but even as she reigned over the company, the shadows were never far behind. As the city skyline glittered below, Natalia stood in her office, overlooking the vast empire she had inherited and rebuilt. Her phone buzzed on her desk, and she picked it up, already knowing who it was. "There's a new development," the text read from Dmitri. She glanced at the message, her mind racing with the possibilities of what might be next. But this time she was ready. The challenges of the corporate world, betrayal, ambition, rivalry, were far from over, and Natalia knew she would have to be vigilant. She couldn't let her guard down. With one last look out the window, she smiled to herself. She had fought for this. She had built it with her own hands, with blood, sweat, and tears, and nothing, not Jessica, not Evan, not even Dmitri's shadow, could take it from her. She had learned the hardest lessons, faced the fiercest battles, and now she stood stronger than ever. Natalia was the queen of this empire, and no one would ever take that crown from her.